There's something happening all over sports at a rate never really seen before. A dramatic rise in the children of former professional athletes becoming professional athletes themselves. And professional hockey is not an exception, it's actually one of the more prominent examples.
They got rid of the gloves and Chuck Knuckles, and Josh is a lot like the old man.
So, why is this happening? To what extent is this happening? And why now? First, are there actually more children of former NHL players playing professional hockey than in the past? Well, there have been 256 people to play in the NHL who are the sons of former NHL players, and 14 who are the grandsons of former NHL players, so 270 sons or grandsons of former NHL players. 84 of those 270 were active in the NHL and or AHL as of this past season. 72 played in the NHL, tied for the highest amount in league history with the 2021-22 and 2022-23 seasons. That means over 25% of every second-generation NHL player in the history of the league played in the NHL in the 2024-2025 season. And while those may not sound like crazy numbers, that's actually a pretty significant amount. That's over 3 NHL rosters, and there are many more who'll be making their professional debuts very soon. For the record, the 2024 draft featured 7 picks who are the sons of former players. And of course, there's more who are expected to be drafted in 2025. So why exactly is this surge happening? Well, obviously the NHL adds many new players every year, and simply put, the more people that play in the NHL, the more children of former players there are to potentially make it there as well. And there's a lot of incentive to do so, as there's obviously a lot of benefits to playing hockey at the highest level. Despite that it isn't going to make you as much money as many other sports, it can still be a very lucrative career. Minimum wage in the NHL is currently $775,000 a year. And of course, many, if not most people, hold the opinion that playing sports for a living beats most jobs in terms of how much pleasure you can get from your work. Of course, most parents want to see their kids succeed and set them up for that success, and who's in a better position to do that than someone who's made a good living and has the ability to directly influence their children to do the same thing they did, whether they're pushing them to play hockey or not.
22-year-old Josh Doan, the son of the Coyotes icon Shane.
Watch the patience here of Shane Doan.
Which is where some second-generation players, on average, could end up being more likely to play high-level hockey than potential first-generation players. A lot of people pass down their hobbies, or passions, or careers to their children, and a lot of the time, those things end up sticking around as hobbies, passions, or careers for their children, especially when they get exposed to whatever it is very often. And whether it's on TV or in person taking in games from low level to the highest level possible, there's a good chance you'll develop some personal connection to the sport if you're constantly around the sport, or I guess if the sport is constantly around you, especially if you really like it.
Honestly, didn't know anything other than hockey. From a young age, me and my brother just gravitated towards it, and that's something I knew I wanted to do growing up.
And it doesn't hurt the prospect of it sticking with you if there's a good living to be made doing it. And having someone who's been there and done that can be as beneficial in sports as anywhere. Other than plain old exposure to the sport, and often even before that, the first advantage many people will point to is money. And hockey is a notoriously expensive sport to play. So if you've made a good chunk of money, perhaps playing pro hockey, you've not only opened the door for your child to play at all, but for them to excel.
The power play goal for Jason Blake. Here's Blake. Jackson Blake to the net. Shot, score!
You gain a solid foundation to learn how to skate and play from the ground up, the ability to afford equipment, travel, and registration fees, to live in areas with quality competition or hockey in general, to get extra ice time, to hire personal trainers or coaches and attend hockey camps, to eat healthy food consistently. Parental commitment can play a big factor, whether you're willing to spend the time and money to do all this, or simply being consistently available because you're in a comfortable place monetarily, whether you're officially retired or not. And then of course, your experience itself can obviously play a massive role. You can pass on advice that coaches or players gave you in your career, and you obviously know what works and what doesn't work as an individual playing the game. You also know how to train off the ice, which personal trainers, coaches, or camps are worth the time. You might have direct connections to those things, and you might know people who can provide even further inspiration. You know what teams, coaches, and leagues want from players, you know what to expect in all kinds of situations, and how to handle making teams or getting cut from teams. You know how to act and how not to act on or off the ice. You could basically be a 24/7 coach. And of course, there are things that could give you involuntary advantages, like inheriting beneficial genetics. And somewhere along the way, simply having your last name could make you stand out to some people. So yeah, having a former NHL player as a parent could certainly be a healthy healthy leg up to say the least. Or grandparent for that matter, as we have seen third-generation professional hockey players.
Paulin Bordelot is left untouched in front of the Montreal goalie.
Thomas Bordelot, grandson of Paulin Bordelot and son of Sebastien Bordelot, was a third-generation player who played for the Sharks this past season. And when Blake Geoffrion made his debut for the Predators in the 2010-11 season, he became the NHL's first fourth-generation player. But of course, it's worth noting that some, if not all of these advantages don't come strictly from having a former NHL player as a parent. Having a parent who played or coached or had anything to do with any high-level hockey could also be very beneficial for a good number of those reasons, whether it's a father or a mother or both. Take the Hughes family, for example. Something tells me that Jim Hughes' experience captaining Providence College, being an assistant coach for the Bruins, and being the director of player development for the Leafs, along with his wife Ellen playing for the United States women's national team, had its benefits in helping get all three of their sons to the NHL. And for the record,
I think my mom was the one who mainly taught me how to skate.
And it's also worth noting that being a high-level athlete of any kind could have an impact. There are plenty of current and former NHL players whose parents were professional athletes competing in sports that weren't hockey. And obviously experience in any sport at such a level could have its benefits, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, rowing, or anything else.
Both his parents were world-class athletes, his mother in basketball, his dad in rowing.
Also, playing multiple sports, or the experience others can impart on you from their experience playing other sports, can make a massive difference in regards to you progressing in very different things, and any walk of life really. Which brings us to the old range debate, specialization versus generalization. Specialization being a sole focus on one sport, and generalization on multiple sports. Specialization can lead to extensive early skill development, but is also more likely to lead to sport-specific injuries or being injury-prone, while generalization can lead to a lack of early skill development compared to others who specialize, but aims at teaching you transferable fundamental skills like the ability to learn or be coachable. When people talk about how difficult it is to play pro hockey, you'll often hear them say that you have to be skating before you can walk, playing hockey at 4, or basically specializing as a toddler, if you will.
For every kid who hopes to turn a love of hockey into a career, one thing's for sure. They have to start young.
Studies suggest that the majority of pro hockey players fully specialized in hockey before they start high school, but many high-level hockey programs these days do encourage multi-sport athletes, with the end goal of it making them better at hockey. And there's been some pretty successful multi-sport endeavors from players before they specialized on hockey, whether they're current or former players. For instance, current New York Islanders captain Anders Lee was an all-state pitcher and quarterback with Division I offers, and former player and current Rangers GM Chris Drury won the Little League World Series as a kid. Is Chris Drury the father of current Avalanche player Jack Drury, you say? No, Chris is Jack's uncle, but Jack's father Ted also played in the NHL. However, regardless of whether or not someone has a former professional or high-level athlete as a parent in any sport, and regardless of what point in their life they specialized on hockey, they still have to have things that every first, second, or third-generation player who makes professional hockey has: dedication and motivation. You can be pushed into specializing or generalizing, and you can have all the help in the world doing either, but in the end, it's up to you. You have to sacrifice a lot, you have to put in a ton of work, and in certain ways, you might need a bit of luck. Being drafted to a team or ending up playing for a coach that results in you significantly improving, for instance. Recently, allegations of nepotism have been flying left, right, and center all over sports, which is a term usually used with negative connotations, where it's insinuated that someone is not deserving of the position they're in, and are only there because of a family connection, and that alone.
Riley Stillman wearing his dad's 61, headed to the penalty box.
Off-ice areas of the sport are potentially another story as far as nepotism goes, but on the ice, playing in the NHL, there's not much chance you'd be granted a single shift, especially these days, without being at least very close to having the ability to play a regular spot somewhere in the lineup. We saw the nepotism accusations thrown around in the NHL very recently when Skylar Brindamore, son of Rod Brindamore, made his NHL debut at age 25 in a couple rather meaningless games for the Carolina Hurricanes, the team his father coaches, which could make you skeptical, and you can't prove it one way or the other, but Skylar Brindamore did score his first goal in his second career game.
Skylar Brindamore's first NHL goal in the building where his father got his 1,000th point.
If you want to argue that certain aspects of nepotism do take place, it pretty much only has any real effect at younger levels of hockey.
You telling me my youngest boy isn't good enough to play for this team?
Nepotism could get you in the door, but hard work and acquiring talent keeps you there and can give you a career. And it's also definitely worth noting that having certain advantages and even the potential for nepotism doesn't guarantee anything for anyone. Lots of kids who are the sons of former NHL players play hockey but don't make it to the NHL, whether their fathers were on the fringe of the league or star players for that matter. But nevertheless, again, we are seeing more and more children of former players that do. Some of it is evolution. There's more money in hockey these days, and the path for how to make it is much more clear-cut. And some of it is that pro sports are becoming more and more of a common goal, not only for kids themselves to pursue, but for parents from any walk of life to push their kids into pursuing. Notoriously crazy sports parents who treat their children's life like a financial investment, which, let's face it, far more often than not doesn't work out for them, and instead robs their children of their childhood, are unfortunately on the rise. From the nutcase parents who freak out at games, embarrassing themselves and their kids, to the ones who homeschool their kids for the sole purpose of having them train for most of the day, every day. But regardless of whether parents are just looking for a payday, or if they're narcissists living vicariously through their children, or if they're genuinely great people, the pursuit of professional sports is becoming more common amongst kids.
You better get fucking skating, Mitch. I swear to God.
And whether it stems from population growth, culture, or evolution in some other way, one country is leading the charge for just about every category of parent whose kids are pursuing the pros. The country that's experiencing the most growth as far as hockey registration and producing NHL players goes. You guessed it, the United States.
The 21-year-old, born in Fargo, North Dakota.
It's the third most populated country in the world, and it's far and away the most populated country that's heavily involved in hockey. And as the sport rapidly expands in the United States, there are continuously more and more parents of any kind whose kids are pursuing pro hockey, including parents who are former NHL players themselves. Part of that comes from the location of the teams themselves. Since most NHL teams are in American cities, most players play in the US. So many players from other countries end up living there for long periods of time, many end up staying there after they're done playing, and many end up having children there, who are now Americans.
My name's Keith Primo, and I'm Caden Primo's father.
Which is part of the reason American international teams are becoming more and more competitive at every level.
They score! Jake Sanderson!
Not only from the US having far and away the most pro teams, but from literally inheriting NHL bloodlines. Not only now, but in previous eras as well. Out of the 66 players who played in the NHL in the 2024-25 season, who are sons of former NHL players, 30, or almost half of them, are American, 18 whose fathers were from other countries. Part of the cause of the overall rise of second-generation players is also because of expansion. There's more spots available than ever before, but there's still currently far more second-generation players on average per number of teams than there ever has been. So is the amount of first-generation players going to continue to decline? It may be too early to tell, but one thing's for sure. In the past few years, and right now, there are more second-generation players playing pro hockey than ever before, and it'll be interesting to see if those numbers continue to rise. Right now, it certainly looks like they will.